Hello and welcome back to The Art of Parenting. This is your host, Jeanne-Marie Pennell. And today I have Randi Rubenstein with us to talk about parenting and some techniques that she has developed that I think will be very useful for our strong-willed children. So thank you, Randi, for making the time to be here with us today, and welcome to The Art of Parenting.
Thanks. I'm excited to talk to you.
So, Randi, I always like to get this started with asking my guest how they define the art of parenting.
That's a good question. The art of parenting. I do think parenting is an art because when I think about art, I think about creativity. I think about, if you were creating something like some kind of artistic project, we all know that the best art is when you are relaxed, you're not overthinking it. You sort of allow things, the art to organically, there's something about this organic component. And, one of the things that I've been talking about a lot lately in my conversations on my podcast and with my members is there's a lot right now that I've noticed, and I think it's probably been going on for a while. I may have even contributed to it at some point, that involves performative parenting, performative peopling. Just give me the script. Just give me the 3 tips. Just tell me what to do. Tell me what to say. And that is not artistic. It's like we can study parenting, and trust me, when I was a young parent, I was reading book after book after book, and I was a student of parenting. But as I grew what I call my pack leadership, really, like I have this pack. Their last name is Rubenstein. They live in my household. And I really am the main pack leader. I'm the one who is really in charge of their care for the most part. My husband's great, but let's be real. It was mostly me, especially in the early years. Now, there's more on him as the kids got older. But when I was studying, I was learning. And as I grew my confidence and as I learned more about myself, including when I thought my kids were pushing my buttons, when I was triggered, when all of a sudden these words were coming out of my mouth that I was never going to say and things I was never going to do, I wasn't remembering all the things that I had read about in those moments.
Right.
And so as I started to learn more about myself, like, what the hell? Sorry, am I allowed to
Of
curse
course.
on here? I hope you can bleep it out. What the hell just happened to me? Why did that happen? And I started to realize there's a reparenting process that has to, like, I have stuff that is coming up. And so the more kind of self-awareness I gained and the more I grew, I really think I grew up alongside my kids in many ways. I became more confident. I became clearer about what kind of leader I truly was growing into and I wanted to be. And as those leadership skills grew within me and my confidence grew, I think I became way more artistic in my parenting, where I always said, like, I'm not the kind of parent that's going to sit down and play Barbies with my kid, or like, I don't even know if I played as a kid, unfortunately. But yet when I just sort of relaxed and didn't try to follow the recipe for how to be the perfect parent, I was playful.
Right.
I was playful when we were cleaning up. I have 3 dogs, cleaning up the dog poop in the yard. All of a sudden we were playing a game of I Spy. I was playful during the witching hour when I turned on music and did a goofy dance as we were, making dinner. I was playful when they said something ridiculous and I was like, really? What's happening there? I was playful in my responses. And to me, that's my long answer for that's what I think that, to me, that is the artistic part of parenting, when you start to feel freer to be who you naturally are,
Right.
and not performing and trying to prove that you're, a certain kind of
Right,
parent.
right. No, and I really like that, because it really, to me, it sounds like it's really about being in your flow, like letting
Yeah.
you be reparented, learn from your children and such, but not, like you say, follow this, perfect manual. Because how many children do you have?
3.
Three. So probably three very different manuals that, you
Yeah.
need to have, and so forth. So it's really about being in, symbiosis with them, and really letting that happen. So thank you for that. That was beautiful.
Yeah.
And Randi, I would love if you could share with our listeners, our viewers, a little bit about your background and how you came to do the work that you're doing, and mastermind parenting, excuse me, and how that all came about.
Okay. Well, it was a happy accident. Let's just
Okay.
say that.
Okay.
It was a happy accident. I never planned on doing this. I never planned that I would still be passionate 26 years later to talk about parenting. My youngest child's about to go to college. So I'm entering in. I just heard somebody refer to this not as empty nesterhood, but as open doorhood. Like I think it was Mel Robbins actually, who she said, it's like there's an open door that they're going to come and they're going to go, and they're going to come and they're going to go.
So
and
true.
I really like
so
that.
True. Yeah.
I really like that. But I had someone ask me recently, like, are you going to shift gears? Because, like, does this feel relevant now that your kids are pretty much grown? And I said, I can't get enough of these conversations. Like, I could help, whether it's the parent of a teenager or the parent of, what was a conversation I just had about the 5-year-old who, it's time for the 5-year-old to start eating in a much less picky way, and to stop being bathed by mom, like, it's time, like the child's in kindergarten. It's time to grow up a little bit. And I can't get enough of these conversations. I'm not 100% sure why I'm so passionate about it. All I know is that I gave birth to my first child at 27 years old. I wasn't really planning. I was married and got pregnant very quickly and wasn't trying. So I wasn't planning to be a mom at 27 years old. And then all of a sudden, here I was, and I was a mom. And he cried a lot. And he cried a lot, and he startled easily. And he wasn't easy at all. And I'm a problem solver. I put my head down. So that's when I started reading the books. I needed to read all the books. And my husband would say, who are you? What are you reading? And why are you acting like you're cramming for a semester final? And I'm like, are you talking to me? I'm in the middle of something. Like, I was obsessed.
Yeah.
And so obsessed. And really what I know now is that led to, then I took a parenting class when he was a little over 3, and I'd had another baby with my husband. I basically gave my husband an ultimatum. I said, we're either taking one of these parenting classes, which sounds weird. That's what he said. It sounds weird. Or we're like going to some kind of therapy. We got to do something. Now I believe in both. I think everybody should have both in their lives. But at the time, that sounded crazy to me. And he was like, I guess parenting class. So we took a 6-week parenting class, and it taught me some things. And then before you know it, I learned, some other things, and it taught me some things. And my kid went through different difficult stages. But for the most part, I was really on a mission to take this child and make him happy. And so while I had the best of intentions, I didn't realize how much sort of codependency and control was on the scene.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And I really think he's now 26 and we're very close. He's thriving. He's like a launched adult, and a grown man and has a job and went to college and did all the things. And I went on to have 2 other kids. And I really think in many ways I grew up alongside him. And 26 years is a long time that I've been doing this. And over the course of his life so far, I went through, when I'm the kind of person, if like I found some amazing shoes at that were a deal at one of the discount stores, I'm like, I have to tell everyone else about these amazing shoes. Like, I'm not a hoarder. I want to share the wealth. So I didn't realize I was sort of a natural teacher. And so I started, so everything I was learning that was, stage by stage, transforming my life, my family, my child, myself, I was sharing it with other people. And I got into the parent education space accidentally. I was training teachers accidentally on classroom management, on their most difficult kids in their classroom, the kids that lead to a lot of teacher burnout. And I knew pretty early on, because I was so passionate about these concepts, but also teaching through the real stories of what was happening in these different teachers' classrooms, what was happening in my family, what was happening in the families, without naming names, of the parents who were taking my classes. And at first I bought a curriculum way back when, and I had translated this curriculum that was designed for teachers.
Okay.
It was an academic program, and I translated it into parenting language because I was learning all these amazing concepts, and I was, using them in my household and seeing how valuable. But ultimately I had to trademark my own method, because it's like, many, many years, it's like a poo-poo platter of methods. I mean, I learned things from Brene Brown. I learned things from, the coach that I ended up getting trained by, Martha Beck. I learned so much along the way. And then my own real life stories, and then the clients that I worked with. So now I have my method, which is called Mastermind Parenting. And it really is just, like, how do we as the adults sort of, it's a lofty goal, but master our own minds, right?
So
master
important.
Our own minds, rather than trying to, like I did so, early on, rather than trying to mastermind and control our kids. What happens when we look in the mirror and focus on us? Right.
And so important, because I think most guests that I have on the show are it's always about, it comes back to us. Like the child is just putting a mirror up to us, and how do we, because they come to us pure and eager to learn and all of this. So it's like, we can't have expectations of them knowing what to do. And we have to, I love that. And I love the parallel with, I kind of did the same thing. I actually went back to get a master's when I was 40 some in Montessori education. And I was so blown away by everything that I was learning about children, about development, about how, we could create these environments for our children, that I then wanted to share with the parents, because the parents were always coming to me, when I was in the classroom, as to why their children were so different at home than they were in the Montessori environment. So, I love what you say. Like, when we have a good deal, we want to share it. And that's exactly it. It's like when we figure out, like, oh my gosh, this really works, we want to share it with the world. So beautiful. Thank you for all that.
I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of
Oh,
Montessori, and there's a lot of consistencies with what I teach and my methodology and Montessori education.
mm,
Um, the thing that always frustrates me is when I recommend, for a parent to look at a Montessori school and they say, "Oh, well, my child needs more structure."
it is the most
And I'm like,
structured environment ever.
right,
with
right,
creativity. It's, we call it
right.
freedom
It's
within
artistic.
limits.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can be free within this context, and yeah, that's funny.
It's like that combination of firm and loving.
Exactly.
It's structure. It to me it is art because it's like reading the room, like little kids. I mean, all human beings, we thrive when we have some structure in our lives, even when we don't
Completely.
believe it, because it's certainty. And so when you have a little kid that comes to school and they know from this time to this time, this is what we do, and this is the work that we play with, and when we, or we work on, and and they get to, and their work is really how kids are intended to work, which is through play so much
Exactly.
of the time.
Exactly.
And then, and I mean, I loved when my kids were in Montessori, where it's like you see all these little teeny tiny people and they go and they take out their little rugs,
Yeah.
and that's what they put their work on. And I'm like, there's, it's so beautiful because they're just so capable and they get to feel so capable.
Exactly.
I loved that
Exactly.
structure. Yeah.
And it's a structure to me, and we'll stop there, but it's a structure around the kind of the natural self-discipline that I think we all develop if we're given the freedom to do so, right? That we're not being controlled, that we're just giving the boundaries and the guidance. And I mean, the classroom I had was just a delight because it's true. When children are engaged in purposeful, intelligent work, they're happy, they're serene, they're generous, they're content, and it just, makes for wonderful days. So I just wanted to share that about just the parallel, like how you,
Wait,
yeah,
can I ask you
please.
can I ask you one more
Mhm.
question? Have you seen that movie? We were just talking about France before we started recording, and of course, on my way home from France, I was obsessed with all the French movies they were showing on the plane. And I watched the Maria Montessori movie that just came out in 2023.
Yes.
I can't remember the name.
I saw it in the spring. I was in Paris in April and I saw it then when it just came out, and it was quite lovely. I mean, it was, more of a sentimental. It wasn't as much on the method. It was more how she came about to, to her method. But yeah, it was nice. Did you enjoy it?
I thought it was brilliant.
Yeah.
I thought it was brilliant, and I've recommended it to. I always have to look it up every single time because I can't remember the name. But the thing I thought that was really fascinating about it was how she was a physician, and she really came up with the method for these kids who society had labeled like they were the throwaway kids. They were put into institutions, and they were, called names that, I mean, they were labeled things that we now consider to be extremely negative. Yeah, they were called idiots, and
Yep.
and they, yeah, and a lot of these kids were nonverbal, and she developed these methods. It was for like the lost society of children that were just going to be institutionalized for life. And she incorporated all of this art,
Yes.
and
Yes.
sensory. Like, I thought it was so interesting how she had them in the bathtubs, and she had all these teachers like working on the sensory issues, and, like using water, and she used music. So she brought all of this art into developing their senses and some of the lagging skills that they had. And then once these kids started showing all of their capabilities, and so many of them became verbal and were able to learn to read and write and do all these amazing things, then she started to realize, oh, these methods aren't just for this population of children.
Right.
also for all children, you know? So I thought that the
Right,
roots of the story.
because of the fact that, like you say, these were kind of, children that were deemed like useless, right? When she worked with them, she realized how amazing their brain were and how, that they could do a lot of things. And so, it's like, well, if this is happening with these children that are supposed to not be able to learn, what is it going to do for those who are able to learn regularly? Yeah. I mean, it's funny. I was just talking to somebody this weekend about and this is, the feminist in me speaking, but I'm somewhat convinced that if Maria Montessori had been a male figure in education in that time period, I think education would have looked quite different but unfortunately, because she was a woman, she wasn't taken all that seriously. So that's
I think it's valid.
Yeah. So the movie is in French, it's La Nouvelle Femme, which is the new woman. Definitely. And I'll put the link in the show notes, but thank you. Thank you for that little Montessori love. I'm glad. So back to your method, mastermind parenting. I know you have kind of a framework that you call NICE. Would you be able to share just a little bit, kind of an overview of it to intrigue us as to what that's all about?
Yeah. So when people come and work with me, they go through our foundational program. We call it our basics.
Okay.
And I teach them, I like acronyms because I think acronyms are easy to remember. And I specifically like hokey acronyms or tongue-in-cheek, because I think it helps the brain, because it's novel, it's creative, and it helps the brain to remember. So I came up with the NICE acronym for when people come to me, because everyone comes and they say, I was a strong-willed kid. How do I get them to, be more cooperative? How do I get them to listen to me? How do I get them to respect me more? How do I get them to stop being so difficult? Now, there's not lots of nice ways we sugarcoat that,
Right.
but it's really like once everyone feels comfortable, it's like, but why won't they listen? And they just won't. A lot of times I write about this, like if you have a kid that just won't, you ask them to do something and they're like, no, or they ignore you. Right. So it's the kid that just won't, the kid that seems defiant, the kid that just, and I'm like, well, we got to diagnose what the real issue is. So we're going to attack the situation like we're scientists. And this is our framework, right? Because you are the pack leader. You've got this little pack and you're the leader, and you're going to figure out, well, what's the real issue? Quite often people come and they think the real issue, and I think this kind of ties back to the Montessori thing, which is like, it's almost like I just got a toughie, like I just got a hard kid. They just came out like this. And so the NICE framework helps me to take parents through sort of the re-education process.
Okay.
It's not that you got a toughie. It's not that I got a toughie. Now, if I compared my oldest son to his younger siblings as a newborn, there was a lot of there was more to figure out, but the bottom line was he just was a highly sensitive person. He just had a sensitive nervous system, and that startle reflex was very strong. So what did he really need when he was a baby? Well, that was before they had those little swaddle contraptions. And that was before, we knew that kids that have an extra sensitive nervous system, who have that startle response so strong, that's their temperament. Maybe he was feeding off of me oh my gosh, I'm 27 years old.
I was going to say, and you were a new parent. You were a young new parent. That plays a lot. Yeah.
What's the chicken and what's the egg?
Right,
All I know is that his temperament from the beginning was definitely much more sensitive, especially than his youngest, sibling, my son that's about to go to college, who was super chill from the beginning, So maybe they would have had different temperaments. Maybe it was affected by birth order. I don't freaking know. But when people come to me, I'm like, okay, let's start learning about our, what's really going on with your kid. So we go through, and the first, 3 weeks, we teach them about needs, basic needs.
Okay.
That's the end.
Okay.
Okay. And basic needs, a lot of what I talk about in terms of basic needs is just like, as human beings, what do we need to survive? Right? We need food and water. We need sleep. I mean, obviously we need shelter and all those things, but we need food, water, we need shelter, we need sleep, we need connection, right? We are pack animals.
Right.
No, human beings are not the same as octopus. Like we have to be in connection with other human beings. So we really go through and we're assessing basic needs. So usually the very beginning, the first 3 weeks, we're cleaning up a lot of sleep for 90% of the people.
Interesting. Yeah.
There's just some sleep hygiene and it's not just for the kids, it's for the parents too,
Right.
because I don't know about you, but I am definitely not keeping my cool when somebody's acting all out of sorts when I'm sleep deprived, right? I'm much better when I'm well rested. So we talk about basic needs for the big people and the little people. And then we start to go through the next wing of the framework. We investigate. And they start to learn all behaviors communication. So if I've got a kid that seems like they just start their day just from a place of they just won't, they just won't, no matter what we say, there's something to figure out. Sometimes there may be some, a kid that is like one of my favorite stories that from years and years ago was a mom who came to me whose kid was in first grade, and she had taken a sabbatical from work because every day she was just waiting for the principal's office to call. And he was just like a disaster at school. And the day she finally called me he was under his desk growling like an animal, like threatening to bite the teacher. And now he's in the principal's office and she needs to come and pick him up. And she's like, I don't know what to do. So there was some real investigation. Well, guess what we found out? I mean, yes, we had a lot to clean up in terms of basic needs in the household and adding more structure. And, mom had a lot of travel with work. And so there hadn't been, it had been kind of fly by the seat of the pants. And so we had some structure and different things to put in place. But what we found was this little child had dysgraphia. And yeah. And so once we really investigated, I said, I think there's something more. And what we realized was he was showing his absolute worst behavior at school when it was time to write in their journals in first grade.
Right.
They were learning to write these sentences. And I mean, this poor kid, he was like getting, he was going to get admonished when he was refusing to do the journal because he literally could not do it.
Yeah.
And then he was going to get in trouble at home and he was going to get in trouble with teacher. And he went into a survival state.
Aww.
He's under the desk growling like an animal. And I mean, I think he's now in high school, and every once in a while I'll run into the mom and she went on to start a school because she was this just amazing woman that she was like, what we were going through, all that I learned, I got to help all the other kids out there who are going through similar. So we really spend some time investigating whether it's patterns that we need to disrupt within the family, that we've just been in these combative, negative attention seeking patterns. That's sometimes it. Or, maybe there's an intense sibling fighting situation. That might be part of it. And sometimes there is a learning difference. There is something to figure out. And then when we move into the C wing of NICE, I teach them about what I call pack leadership.
Okay.
Really, as women, I think cultures, in America, I don't know that this is necessarily the case in France, right? But in America and other places, but in America, I think that quite often when many women, when we were little girls, we were sent messages that were what I call unpack leadership. Just be nice. That's also why I call it the nice framework, because we're telling our kids constantly, be nice, be nice, be nice. And we're barking at them and we're being the opposite of nice. And
That's
I don't
so
know
true.
about anyone else, but I'm like, I don't really want to learn new things or I don't feel like someone's on my team rooting for me if they're being mean to me.
Right.
And kids are egocentric. So they're not thinking that they're being mean. They're looking to their adult to sort of model the behavior that
Exactly.
they seek,
Yep.
right? So that's my tongue-in-cheek way. It's like, and I teach all the parents, like, pack leadership. When we communicate, the 𝐷𝐶 is how we communicate with pack leadership and empathy. And empathy is really, we're going to take into consideration, like, what's going on with our kid? Who is this little person? What kind of day have they had? We're going to read the room, right? So when you start to tell your kids all the ways that they need to improve after a long day of school when they're completely out of batteries, that's not your best moment. That's not you being the with it human that you are in all these other situations of life. You're not reading the room. You're not understanding. Your kid can't even take that in. And all you're going to do is push them into a defensive place. So we learn how to communicate with strong leadership. And we learn also how to be assertive, because as little girls, we were taught to say things real sweet and be real nice.
Not to offend anybody.
Yeah, no offense. And we're saying, is that okay? And we say okay when we're really actually not asking a question and we're asking permission all the time. And these little tiny people, they're literal. And if you're asking them if it's okay with them to take a bath and they're busy playing, no, not okay. They're going to keep doing what they want to do. Like, you got to learn some better communication skills as a pack leader. So I teach them that. And then the last part of the NICE framework, we get to the part that everybody comes in asking me about, which is, when do we get to do the consequences? Like, they're all so happy that I'm not, I am not gentle parenting. I do believe that I think there's a lot of beautiful things about gentle parenting. And also, somebody sent me a meme a few years ago that said, gentle parenting is for gentle kids. I'm raising a gangster. And I said, I do believe in consequences, but I believe in consequences the right way. And it is actually very rare that we have to get to consequences. When we assess basic needs, investigate behavior, communicate with pack leadership and empathy, if we have a recurring issue, like a kid who just keeps forgetting to bring their homework folder to school, or a kid that is having such a hard time getting off the screen when their allotted time is over, or a kid that is showing up with a lot of violence towards their sibling, or really any violence towards their sibling on a consistent basis. When we have a kid that will benefit from a consequence, then we enforce a consequence. But we go through a lot before we get to that point. And sometimes we do need a consequence, but we don't do it in a jerky way. There's a beautiful art to being a nice parent when you're enforcing a consequence.
So all wonderful. I mean, I love that we, go through the basic needs, which I think is always so important. I know when I work with parents, I always talk about the universal needs of children and so forth. So that's very important. Investigate is kind of that observing, seeing what's going on and being aware, communicating as well. Enforce. So this is where I need a little bit more, I guess, guidance in that.
Yeah.
I am the mindset that consequences, I feel sometimes have been misused or misunderstood because they don't have anything to do with the actual situation. Sometimes, it's like, if you don't eat your spinach, we're not going to go to the park. It's like, what does that got to do
Right.
with? So I'd love if we could understand a little bit more when you say enforcing consequences. Like, what does that really mean, and how is that going to be helpful to the child?
So the word enforce is a strong word, but to me, enforce is following through,
Right.
which is hard. That's why I think so many parents find themselves, if you do that one more time,
Right.
we're threatening. But when we're enforcing, we're just following through. We're just keeping our promises. We're just doing the thing that we said we were going to do.
Right.
Consequences, look, natural consequences are the best consequences. And the enforcing of consequences, when it was, let's say it's about the kid who's forgetting to bring their homework to school. Okay. And this has been a recurring issue. So we're always talking about what's the plan and what's the consequence out of the moment.
Okay.
We don't do it for the first time. The first time they and the C wing of my NICE framework is we communicate with pack leadership and empathy. Well, in that wing, I teach my productive conversation method.
Okay.
So when there's a recurring issue, right? We're scientists. We're going through this NICE framework. We've got this problem that we're trying to solve. Like, my kid is forgetting to bring their homework folder to school or home from school or whatever it is. Okay. So here's the problem: forgetting the homework, not being responsible for the homework. We know it's a recurring issue. We're like, okay, is it a basic needs thing? Nah, it's not. We're good. We're moving and grooving there. I've investigated the behavior. Yeah, maybe I've got a kid that's got, they've got shiny objects, like squirrel, and out of sight, out of mind, and they haven't developed those executive functioning skills yet. They just don't have a system yet for remembering to bring the homework home and taking the homework to school. So now I'm going to communicate, and I'm going to go through and have a productive conversation with them. And so we have a conversation, and I have, a whole framework that I teach, which is basically like, we just meet the kid where they are, which is, I've noticed you got a lot going on. You're in 4th grade, you're playing soccer, you're making friends, you've homework started to ramp up, you're still a little kid in many ways at heart. You got a lot going on. It's hard to keep up with everything. Right? So we're not saying, you've been really irresponsible when it comes to, and I'm sick of bringing this up to school. And it's not that. It's just meeting your kid where they are. They have a lot going on for whatever reason. And then you go through and you come up with the plan, and you're problem solving the plan together. What do you think would help you be more would help you to remember that? What kind of system, what are your ideas? And you really understand, as this effective pack leader, you are truly problem solving with your kid. You're not lecturing to them. So after we spent all this time doing that, at the end of that productive conversation, we've got our plan. We're like, okay, and this is the PS. The PS is the consequences. The PS, it's not the main conversation.
Right.
The main conversation is problem solving together.
Right.
And so when we get to the PS, we're like, so what happens if, oops, you planned on remembering the whole homework folder. You did the whole plan. You had the system. It was right, on your desk with your backpack there. Every morning I'm going to take it off my desk. I'm going to put it in my backpack, and I'm going to go, and you get to school and it's not there. Then what? What do you think happens then? And your kid might go, I call you from the office and you bring it to me like you normally do. And you're like, that's what we're not doing anymore. If you forget the homework, then you have to deal with the consequence of whatever your teacher. Maybe she only will dock partial. Maybe she'll give you partial credit if you bring it in the next day. I don't know. But that's going to be your business. And so even if you call me from the office, just know. Now, I had a rule that once a semester, especially as my kids got older, once a semester you get a jail free card.
Yeah.
Once a semester, one time, And so if they called me and they were like, I was like, okay, so are you using your one get out of jail free card for me to bring it up there? Because just know, is this assignment that important that you want to use that chip? And I've had kids that are like, no, no, she's just going to take 10 points off. I can bring it in tomorrow. Right. So that would be a natural consequence, is you let your kid be without the homework and deal with the repercussions.
Right.
Now, sometimes, though, we have to enforce a consequence that, it's like we've got a kid that's showing up violently with their siblings. They're having a real hard time with impulse control. And even though you have amazing productive conversations, and even though they're not in this defense zone place with you, their younger sibling, it's just a strong pattern. It's combative. They find themselves losing it and they're hitting their sibling. They're doing something. And this is something that I'm going to have to enforce a consequence, and it needs to be logical and related.
Right.
So if you have a kid you've got a no violence policy, and your kid, kicks their sibling or whatever, and then you say, that's it, no dessert tonight. That's not logical or related.
No. Right.
It's not.
Right.
It's not. And kids are super logical. And if you take the time to have these conversations out of the moment, they actually they get it.
They do.
Especially this family is amazing. We love each other too much. This has to be a safe zone for everyone. We're your team. We are a pack.
Right.
There's absolutely no violence happening. And if you have an oops, because it's hard to live with people. It's hard to live with people. Okay. I get it. Y'all get on each other's nerves sometimes. And if you have an oops where you forget to say, I need some space, I'm walking away, I didn't like it when you grabbed that thing or did that thing. When you forget your words and you go to the violent hands or the violent words, just know for 1 week, we will not be having any play dates. I need to make sure that this house is a safe zone first and foremost for all of the people who live here, before it's going to feel okay for you to go to other people's houses or to bring other people here.
Right. Right.
This is a very important, I take this very seriously. Right. This family matters a lot, and it needs to feel safe for everyone.
And that is relatable, because it's about the behavior that, could be risky for other children. Yes. No, makes total sense. And it was, I was in agreement, but I was being kind of the devil's advocate for you to
love
because
it.
I often think that, there has to be consequences. And sometimes it's like, well, there's a natural consequence. The child forgets to take their lunch. Well, they're going to be hungry. They're going to have to ask for, to eat something out of somebody else, or ask the teacher if she has extra snack. Like, they'll figure it out. And I think that's also like life lessons of how to manage disappointments and so far. So thank you for that. One more thing, and I'm being conscientious of time. So one more thing is just, if you could, for our listeners and viewers, maybe, what is your definition of a strong-willed child? I know for me, when parents come to me and say, I have a strong-willed child, I often say, well, that's wonderful, because that's somebody who knows what they want. Like, that's great. They're not going to, be walked all over, but sometimes it can be challenging. And so I'd love to, what is that definition for you when you say strong-willed child?
For me, I use that definition because I think every parent loves their child. And when we use the words, it's like, and especially for women, many of us wish we could be stronger, wish we could speak up more, wish we knew how to have boundaries, right? Like, wish we knew how to stop saying yes to everything when we really want to say no. And so the strong-willed language, I think, is a way of identifying, you got a kid that just won't. This is not a child that is just going to go along to get along. This is a kid with a lot of leadership energy, with a lot of opinions. And a strong will is not necessarily a bad thing. I think we can all agree that there's many positives to it. And when we have a kid that is showing up with this strong will and combating us on everything. And they're not cooperative. They're not, like we talked about at the beginning, when things feel artistic and we're calm in our bodies and it's organic and we're in flow. They are constricted. They are tight. They are defensive. So we don't want to squash their spirit, because I think we understand it's not such a bad thing to have a strong will. If you got a lot of leadership energy, that's a beautiful thing. And also, this is a family that deserves to get along and deserves to run smoothly and deserves to feel like a cohesive pack that is working together. And so I kind of use that language because I find that it's very different than if I were to say, if you've got a difficult kid, if you've got a challenging child, if you've, like, that's almost feels like we're talking badly about our kids.
Right. Okay.
So it's a way of identifying we got something to figure out, but I also don't want to squash my child's spirit.
Right. Which makes total sense. And thank you for that, because to me, I mean, it is a positive thing to have somebody, who knows what they want, and they're opinionated, and I think that's good, but it's true, sometimes it can be a little challenging. So yes, perfect. Well, thank you. This has been delightful, and I love what you've, from your experience and your learning, just put together something that is very tangible for many families. So thank you for that. And to wrap it up, I would love if you could go back to that young 27-year-old that was expecting their first child. So you say your eldest is 26. So going back to 27 years ago, of what wise words would you tell yourself, knowing all that you know today?
I will say it was a conversation I just had with my 18-year-old.
Oh, okay.
Today.
Okay.
I was driving him to the airport. He's going to visit his college roommate to go on a hiking trip, get to know each other. And we were talking about something, and he asked me about the early stages of life. And I said, I actually think he was talking about one of our dogs. And I said, so much happens during the early years of life, like the years that most of us don't remember, right? We do have a memory in our bodies, but we don't consciously remember. And I said, if there is anything I can impart on you, it is that one day when you have children, if you have a wife that you have children with, understand that she deserves like a full partner and full support. I said, because when I was, all those years ago, I said the difference between when I had you and when I had Alec, I said, by the time I had you, I was older and I knew some things, and I knew I deserved support. And he was asking me a lot of questions about the early stages. And I said, it is way too much on one person to be sleep deprived, to be feeding a baby every 2 to 3 hours at night, and then, to be alone during the day. And it's just not the way human beings were ever designed to live or be, and I said it was lonely. It was hard. There was so much to learn. I said, so by the time he goes, well, what was so different when I came around? I said, well, I hired a nighttime doula for every couple of nights who came in, and I did it where I could sleep for 6 hours every third night. And that was a savior. And, I had a lot of help and support, and it wasn't all on me. And I said, and I just didn't know that I could have that when I had Alec. And I really felt alone a lot. And he was like, so like, get the baby and I was like, yeah, like like realizing this is not all on the the mom of the baby. You're going to be a dad one day, and this is your baby too.
Right.
And so I would say I would have known that it was never supposed to be all on me, and me acting like, oh, this is just natural. This is just, my maternal instinct, and I can put up with scraps. Like, I'm freaking exhausted, but I would have had the self-worth to advocate for way more support for myself.
Wonderful. Thank you. So all of you listening who are maybe in the early stages of parenting or expecting, please, those are very, very important words of wisdom, because parenting was never meant to be done alone. So I love that. Thank you, Randi.
And I'll say this about it was interesting because my husband is wonderful, and he really is. And we've grown up together a lot during this whole process. And he said, well, why wasn't Dad more helpful? And I said, you know what? Both of us were raised in misogynistic households, and we didn't know yet what we didn't know. And now we know different.
Yeah.
Both of us.
Yeah.
Know different.
Yeah. No, and I will say that I'm also a birth doula, and I actually just spent 2 nights with a little infant the other night to give mom a break because she's a single mom. But I will say that I have witnessed a really beautiful evolution in parenting where the fathers of the babies are way, way more involved during the birth, during the newborn care, during pregnancy. And it's really beautiful to see. There is, you're raising sons that will know that down the road. So that's wonderful. Thank you, Randi. Randi, any parting words that you would like to leave our listeners and viewers with today?
Like I said, that topic of performative parenting is very much on my mind. And I think with all of the, social media and how much time everyone spends on social media and all the clips and tips and while there is some really decent information, I want everyone to realize a big part of the art of parenting is that we are messy humans. And sometimes you're going to yell at your kids. Sometimes you're going to say things that you swore you weren't going to say. And I think breaking up with perfectionism and thinking, I knew better, I've been studying, and I'm really speaking to younger me too here. It's like, you get to be a human, and sometimes we're going to mess it all up, and we just get back on the horse the next day.
Yeah.
And and there's this beautiful thing we can repair by saying, well, that was scary. Did I scare you? I'm really sorry for doing that.
Yeah.
Come here. Can we hug it out too soon? Can we hug it out? Right? You can repair by owning it and just being an imperfect, messy human, and knowing that your kids are going to have lots of, especially if you've got a strong-willed one, they're going to have a lot of imperfect, messy human moments. And that's what truly connects people, is when I get to be me and you get to be you, and we get to mess it all up, and then we come back together.
So true. So true. Thank you so much. This has been a delightful conversation, and I really appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. This was great.